Our first speaker today is Rahaf Harfoush. I am very proud to say that Rahaf is an Ivy HBA alum. She is sadly joining us virtually today from Paris, France. There was a last-minute change that we had to do to accommodate what I would call a higher cause. And Rahaf, you can say hi to the President Macron for me. But we're very happy that she was able to accommodate and be able to come here today. She actually videotaped her opening remarks because she was worried that the Zoom link might not work, but she is listening in. And following, we're going to have Nicole Haggerty, our Assistant Dean of Mentorship and Associate Professor of Information Services, come up and do a Q&A session. So a little bit of background about Rahaf. She is a strategist. She's a digital anthropologist and a New York Times best-selling author who focuses on the intersection between emerging technologies, innovation, and digital culture. Rahaf is the executive director of the Red Thread Institute of Digital Culture and teaches innovation and emerging business models at Sciences Polytech School of Management and Innovation in Paris. Formerly, Rahaf was the associate director of the Technology Pioneer Program at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, where she helped to identify disruptive startups that were improving the state of the world. She is currently working on her fourth book. You may be familiar with her best-selling book. Her third book, entitled Hustle and Float, Reclaim Your Creativity and Thrive in a World Obsessed with Work, was released in 2019. She has been featured by Bloomberg, the CBC, CTV, and Forbes for her work on marketplace culture. Rahaf is the co-author of The Decoded Company, Know Your Talent Better Than You Know Your Customer. And her first book, Yes, We Did, an insider's look at how social media built the Obama brand, chronicles her personal experience as a member of Obama's digital media team during the 2008 presidential election and explores how social networking revolutionized the political campaign. Rahaf was named as a young global changer by the G20 Global Think Tank Summit. She has also been recognized by the World Economic Forum as a young global shaper and by the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society as a rising talent for her thought leadership in the fields of digital culture and technology. Please join me in welcoming Rahaf, and let's listen to her video. Thanks.
Hello. Good morning. I am delighted and honored to be here with all of you today, celebrating over 100 years of excellence in education and leadership. Before we get started, I wanted to take a quick opportunity to say thank you to the Ivy team and to express my gratitude at their constant and unwavering support of my career over the past several years. In particular, I wanted to say a very special thank you to Professor Haggerty. Professor Haggerty, hello. It is so good to see you. I am delighted to be able to thank you publicly for the positive impact that you had on my career. You probably don't know this, or don't remember rather, but when I was your student, I came to you one day after class and I was feeling really frustrated because I couldn't seem to find anybody that had the same type of career path I was looking to build for myself. And I'll never forget what you said. You said to me, it just means that that path doesn't exist yet. So somebody has to be first. And those words really changed my life. They gave me permission and they made me brave enough to leap into a career that I love. And today, my work as a digital anthropologist has given me the incredible opportunity to be in rooms with policymakers, heads of state, CEOs, and contribute to conversation around policies for AI and emerging technology. And I think that that is a testament to the caliber of education that I received at Ivy, an education that I believe prepared me to not just imagine the future, but to be courageous enough to actively try and participate in it and to shape it. So for that, I want to say thank you. I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to be here with all of you today. So let's talk about digital anthropology. Let's talk about my research. When people ask what a digital anthropologist is, they often don't really know, and that's fine. Digital anthropology is the study of technology and culture. And how the two intersect. How do the technology that we create impacts our culture, and how does our culture impact the technology we create? The easiest way is to show you. So I want to start with a story. This is an application, a company called Replica. And Replica creates companion bots. So they use ChatGPT to create AIs that can be your friend. And here's how it works. You sign up to the app for free, and you get to design your very own best friend. You get to pick their hair color, their name, their personality traits, their interests, and you can talk to them and text them as often as you want, whenever you want, and they will always reply. But here's where it gets a little interesting. For $5 a month, you can actually upgrade to a service called Replica Pro. And Replica Pro allows you to unlock an AI as a romantic partner. So a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, wife, etc. As a part of the features, if you are a paying member, you get access to something called ERP. And ERP stands for erotic roleplay. So as you can imagine, that means you can send and receive messages that are pretty spicy, I'm going to say, that are pretty explicit and intimate in nature with your AI boyfriend or girlfriend. Let me show you what that actually looks like. I'm kidding. I'm not actually going to show you what that looks like. That would be a completely different keynote. What I will tell you as a researcher who has studied this community extensively is that the people who have AI relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic, consider these relationships to be highly meaningful and important. So everything was going well. People were befriending, romancing their AI partner of choice until the company received a letter from the EU telling them that they were in violation of GDPR, GDPR being our large data privacy policy. And in order to avoid a giant fine, Replica had to make some very quick changes to their back-end operations. And one of those changes involved turning off ERP. So they did, but they didn't tell any of their users that they were going to do so. And as you can imagine, that did not go over very well. The community was absolutely devastated. Hundreds of thousands of people reported waking up, sending their AI partner a loving message, and then being rejected, being broken up with, being forgotten. This was something that was not what they had signed up for, and certainly not what they had paid for. And as I watched this controversy unfold, I found myself fascinated because I was thinking about how complex the business landscape has gotten in terms of the products and services that we can just bring to market. Because I kept thinking, okay, well, is it even ethical to build a business that is designed to gamify intimacy? And if you think that this is a silly example, it could never happen to you, if you think, oh, who could ever fall in love with a piece of tech? I'm here to tell you that the research is pretty clear about this. All of us can and have this ability to form an emotional attachment to objects. This is a report from 10 years ago that scientists did about people who owned robotic vacuums. And what they found out was that the majority of owners developed some type of behavior that showed affection towards this machine. So they gave it a nickname. They moved the furniture out of the way in their homes so that the vacuum could have an easier way. They worried about it if it was in distress. You get the idea. This was 10 years ago. So I was curious and I was like, is this still a thing? So I looked, and as of a couple of days ago, this might have changed since then, but as of a couple of days ago, you could get a maid's vacuum for your little Roomba for about 41 Canadian dollars, almost 42 Canadian dollars. And this is a vacuum. This isn't a technology that has a human sounding voice that remembers your birthday and that asks you about your hopes and your dreams. Now, the reason I started by talking about sexting with AIs and developing an emotional attachment to vacuum cleaners is because when we talk about technology within a business context, we often tend to focus on the surface changes we can see to the business. We say this is going to change marketing, recruiting, this is going to change supply chain logistics. But by doing so, we often overlook some of the deep cultural impacts that these tools have on our society. And I believe that if we overlook these cultural impacts, we end up underestimating technology's influence and our role in co-creating the society that we all live in. And that's why today I'd like to share with you 3 digital culture themes that I believe every leader should be thinking about as they try to figure out how they want to move forward in this new technological landscape we find ourselves in. Now, the first theme is investing in building knowledge and expertise. So I know that we have been hearing a lot about the hype around AI, specifically generative AI. So I thought it would be important to just very quickly orient us in terms of where we are right now. So we are currently in the process of shifting from Web 2, which is the social web, Web 2.0, which gives people the ability to create content, to the generative web. And the generative web is the read, write, generate web. And that just means that we now have technologies in place that enable us to create content at scale. So this looks like some of the image generation software that we've been seeing. This is Adobe service that allows us to expand and create all sorts of images, including trying to imagine what famous paintings, for example, look like if we just zoomed out of the view for a little bit. This is an example of Microsoft's Copilot now integrated into Microsoft Office. In this example, a person is taking their client meeting notes and their product roadmap and asking the AI to combine the two and to form a draft. As you can see, the AI does this within a couple of seconds. We have a lot of industries that are now using AI quite significantly, using generative AI quite significantly. For example, JP Morgan Chase is using ChatGPT to analyze speeches given by the U.S. Federal Reserve to try to anticipate market opportunities. We also have big companies, multinationals like Walmart, that are using generative AI, specifically chatbots, to negotiate with their vendors, completely changing the way they manage and think about their supply chains. We have architects, designers, real estate brokers, and developers that are using AI to, for example, generate layouts when they're thinking about the type of property that they want to develop. We have designers and artists that are using AI to help inform their inspiration, to help give them a new way to think about how they want to create their next collection or their next work of art. We also have a lot of organizations that are using it for things like talent recruiting. This is a smart AI chatbot that uses generative AI to do everything from screening candidates to scheduling interviews and scheduling follow-ups, as well as having an automated help desk, allowing companies to give a very personalized experience to the people they want to hire. But as I mentioned, this is all very much a surface level process. Let's dig a little bit deeper. We are entering the age of automated creativity, and that simply means that we are automating ideas in the same way that we automated manufacturing and can now create ideas at scale. This is a landscape analysis created by Nest Labs of what's being called the artificial creativity landscape. If you look at the different types of tasks that these services and startups and companies are trying to tackle, you'll notice that all of these tasks, text optimization, gaming, knowledge management, market intelligence, they all fit under the umbrella of knowledge work. And they all traditionally were tasks that you and I as knowledge workers would do. So this is a piece of digital art that won first prize at an arts fair in the US last year. And it created a very interesting debate because the artist that submitted this piece had created it using generative AI. So instead of using software and sort of making it layer by layer, they just generated it using prompts. And on one hand, you had traditional digital artists saying, that's really unfair because I had to train myself to use Adobe Illustrator. I had to build this image layer by layer, and you sort of have taken the shortcut and you've just generated this image. But the artist responded and said, look, generative AI is my new paintbrush. It's a new technique and people loved the work that it created. And so I think it's perfectly fair. And I want to say, I don't know how I feel about this. I kind of see both sides. Because what really makes a work of art? Is it the technical skill sets that the artist had to possess in order to bring that vision to life? Or is it the image they had in their head that was brought to life through any means possible? And this example kind of gives us a hint about some of the ways that these technologies will force us to rethink the future of knowledge work. Because for one thing, we're now seeing this separation between creative labor and human capital, meaning that we now have technology that can do the tasks that normally only people could do. The other thing that's really interesting is that it's lowering the technical barrier to many creative jobs. So I no longer have to go to art school, for example, to be able to produce work like this. And you can start to see this tension across industries because a lot of us are wondering what this means for our expertise and for our knowledge, for the skills that we have acquired thus far. Most recently, we saw the strikes from the Writers Guild of America in Hollywood who were protesting the use of generative AI in the creative process because what's happening is that studios are turning to services like ChatGPT to come up with movie ideas, to draft a pilot episode, to tweak scripts. And those were all jobs that traditionally they would have hired a human writer to do. So what we're really seeing on a large scale, we're at the very beginning of this right now, is this renegotiation, this reevaluation of human creative labor. What does it mean to have a skill set? What does it mean if that skill set can be dramatically reduced or nullified, even in some cases, by artificial intelligence? The other thing I want us to think about, which I'm thinking a lot about myself, is how using these tools is going to impact us on a cultural level, specifically in how we learn. Because right now we are shifting from a searching culture to a generating culture. So searching culture is very simply the process many of us are familiar with, where you want to look something up. And so you go on the internet, you put in your query, you check a couple of websites, and you have this sort of troubleshooting process to get to the answer that you're looking for and the answer that you're satisfied with. But soon, somebody's process might be a lot simpler. It might just involve opening up the ChatGPT-like service that their work subscribes to or that they subscribe to personally, asking a question and then just getting an answer. And the problem with this is that if we are not careful, we might actually risk losing mastery of thinking. And I say this because as I watch how people are using these tools, it struck me that when I was problem solving, it wasn't just the solution that I benefited from, but problem solving in and of itself is an incredibly important skill that allows you to think critically, evaluate options, come up with solutions, iterate different solutions. But if that process is now being replaced by me just asking a question and receiving an answer, am I being robbed of an opportunity to actually practice some skills that are going to be very important for me to develop in my career across the board? So leaders now have to invest in building intentional expertise. One example of this that I saw recently is in a law firm that is using generative AI to draft documents and contracts and things like that. And what they have decided to do is for new hires will have to manually create like 50 contracts. So to create 50 contracts manually before they are allowed to use the shortcut tool, the generative AI. And the idea behind this is that they will be able to understand the fundamentals of the process so that they can spot any issues in the technology that they use. And I thought that was such an interesting example and a great approach. Because I believe that AI is going to supercharge deep expertise, but it will collapse weak knowledge systems. If you are using AI to build upon or to take advantage of knowledge you already have, it's going to be amazing. But if you're using AI to skip the step of having to learn new skills yourself, you'll have a short-term gain, and then I believe it will erode your knowledge skill set. And this is because many technologies, even the best of them, even ChatGPT, suffer from something called AI hallucinations, whereby you can ask AI a question, like this one right here on screen, and the AI will give you an incredibly confident answer, but an answer that's riddled with mistakes. In this particular example, ChatGPT told the person who asked this question that Noble Ackerson died in 2019, which is not true. And so the only way that we can judge the validity of the answers that we're getting from these new tools is by making sure that we're developing expertise on the side in understanding not just subject matter expertise, but in understanding how to think as well. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is, how will we deepen our expertise to better collaborate with AI? How will we protect our capacity of thinking so that we can make the most out of these tools? Because one thing that I saw a couple of days ago, it's just a couple of days old, is that if we don't do this, we risk having long-term talent issues at our organization. This blog post was talking about the rise of Gen AI unqualified candidates. In other words, people that use AI to generate answers to questions to give off the air that they have expertise, but in actuality, they don't. And then companies hire them and then realize that they don't actually have the skill set or the knowledge that they said they did. The second theme is encoding our beliefs in technology. So what I'm showing you here is called the 20th century aging cycle, which is the model that has determined the model that has visualized how people have been aging for at least the last, say, 50 to 70 years. And all you need to know from this graph is that post-middle age, people would experience diminishing health and then a gradual deterioration. But then something interesting happened, which is we started introducing these health tracking services on people's mobile phones, or like the one I'm wearing on my wrist right now, that gave us insights into our health data, enabling us to change our behavior. And the research shows now, nearly a decade after some of the earliest devices have hit the market, that they have had a profound impact on the people that use them. So people who use these types of devices and have made positive changes to their daily habits have actually been able to stay healthier for longer. This is called the I generation aging cycle, and it actually enables people to maintain sustained good health, followed by a very rapid deterioration at the end of their lives. And what's interesting about this is that now that the technology has impacted the aging cycle, we're seeing the cultural implications of this as well. What I'm showing you now is Instagram senior fitness influencers. So as these devices that were created, as they changed the aging cycle, well, people started to think about and talk about aging differently as well. You have Team Strong Silvers based out of China, a team of men in their 70s that teach people how to maintain their health as they age. You have accounts like Train with Joan, incredibly inspirational. Joan, right here, she started her health transformation at 70. This is her at 70, and this is her at 76. Just wild. One of my absolute favorite accounts is down there. This account is called Batty Winkle. She's 94. And she's sassy, and you better watch out for her because her Instagram bio says that she has been stealing your mans since 1928. And I just love that. But what's important here is that this and accounts like these, coupled with the technology, has completely changed how many of us think about aging. I know personally, if you had asked me, what does a 94-year-old look like? I would have not have thought of that. This has given people a really different perspective, and that's a result of the intersection of a new technology and then the cultural changes that then create a change of expectation around concepts like aging. So technology is the manifestation of belief systems. Basically, any technology that you use has someone's idea of what they think the world should be like inside it. Let me give you an example. This is a software called Novel AI. It's generative AI. It helps you write fiction books and plays and poems and things like that, right? Look at this one interesting phrase down here. I'm going to read it. It says, we use our own AI models trained on real literature. Okay, but what is real literature? Who gets to decide what real literature is? Are we talking about classic English classics? Are we talking about Russian classics? Are we talking about a certain period of time, a certain genre, a certain type of author, a certain gender of author? We don't know. But if I was to use the software, It would actually be guiding my writing and guiding what I created based on a standard it was trying to uphold, based on the standard of what the people who made this technology believe constitutes real literature. And this is just one tiny example. Once you start realizing that everything is sort of these belief systems, you start to realize the seriousness of the conversations, the complexity of the problems that we have to solve. Because here's another example. What if I asked you to picture a CEO, right? So just close your eyes and picture a CEO. You're not alone if your mental image looked something like this. This is the result of an experiment of when researchers asked a couple of different AIs to generate a color photograph of a CEO. So as you notice in the prompt, they didn't say gender, they didn't say in a business suit, they didn't say glasses, they didn't say anything. They just said, what is a CEO conceptually? So that's a CEO, okay. What if we asked it to imagine a terrorist? What if we asked it to imagine a housekeeper? So as you can see, the data isn't simply bits and bytes, right? It is the sum of our ideas and our beliefs as a society that are now being programmed into these very sophisticated large language models. The reason I bring this up is that we have to be careful, because if we're not intentional about how we're designing these tools and what these tools believe to be true, we risk infusing cutting-edge technologies with very old and outdated biases. In this example, this is a CFO platform that uses generative AI to help financial professionals manage their organization's health. And in this particular example, somebody asks, what client has the highest risk? And then the AI responds, okay, but how are we defining risk? Is it an American definition of risk? Is it a French definition of risk? Is it a Canadian definition of risk? We should probably know, because all of those have cultural nuances and differences. And what about the solution that is being generated? We should probably figure out the playbook that it's pulling from. Is it a Chinese playbook, an Australian playbook? So these are the types of questions you have to ask yourself when you bring a technology in, not just how much does it cost, what are the features, where can we get efficiencies? You really have to look deeper and look at the cultural context in which these tools were created. So the second question I want you to ask yourself is, does our technology align with our belief systems? The third theme is connecting ideas at scale and how algorithms specifically are really changing the way that we communicate. And for this example, I want to talk about TikTok, because I think TikTok revolutionized digital communications largely in part to their incredible algorithm. So to understand how TikTok made such a difference, we have to look at what came before. This graph that you see on screen right now on the slide is a visual representation of our data on the old sort of the original format of a social graph. So if you use LinkedIn or Facebook, your social graph looks something like this. This is a social graph of a Facebook employee. So as you can kind of see, the purple dots are their colleagues, the blue are their fraternity brothers, the red is their family. And this is how many of our maps look like online. Now, to contrast, I would like to present to you an image of what a TikTok user's social graph looks like when they use the app. So take a moment and absorb the differences in these two footprints. What this tells us over here in terms of the TikTok map is that the chaos and the complexities is that the information that TikTok users receive isn't presented to them from their contacts. It's coming to them from the algorithm. It's the algorithm that's determining relevancy. And you might not know this if you don't use TikTok regularly, but on TikTok, you will receive a majority of content actually from accounts that you don't follow, from people that you are not connected to. So the diversity of information is far more complex than in the old model, because you're not limited by your social contacts as a determinant, as a determining factor as to whether or not you see information or no. So if you are interested in listening to what is happening online, to what young people are thinking about, to what talent wants, to how these changing behaviors and norms are emerging, TikTok is really the place to go, because you have a higher likelihood of seeing that content than you would if you are walled in with your current network. Let me give you an example of some of the conversations I've been following on TikTok. So this user is asking, what's the most toxic thing a leader in your company has ever said to you? And then she goes on to tell her story. And because I watched this, the algorithm now knows I'm interested, not only in similar content, but I'm interested in any time a user on TikTok engages with this original content and answers this question, which means it is very easy for me to follow not just the original question, but how everyone in the community responds to it, which looks something like this. So as you can see, it's not just dancing and memes and jokes. It is a lot of that, but it's not just that. It's also an opportunity where people are really engaging with complicated ideas. I spent a long time looking at this particular conversation, and I learned about a lot of issues and a lot of very public, very well-known organizations and companies that are operating right now. So for me, this is just like a no-brainer. It's just a listening platform. You can create an account and you don't have to create a single TikTok. But if you're not using it to listen, then you're just missing on an incredible opportunity to just improve your decision-making process. Because digital spaces are revealing profound shifts in societal values. And if you don't want to go on TikTok, there are other places that you can go to explore. For example, you can check out a virtual concert on Fortnite. This is Ariana Grande, who did a concert last year. 77 million people showed up virtually to participate in this concert. Think about what that means to the future of entertainment, to how we use digital spaces to engage with fandoms, but how brands can use this. I mean, the possibilities here are really exciting. You can also go onto Minecraft and you can see the Uncensored Library, which contains a repository of an enormous amount of the censored or banned documents that have been made unavailable in specific countries. So think about what it means for a video gaming platform to actually take a stance on information sharing and freedom and access to information. I think it's quite fascinating as well. All of this to say that digital culture can only really be understood through experience. I could spend hours talking to you about everything I'm seeing, but that wouldn't be as effective as you taking 15 minutes and going into some of these places, listening, learning, and trying to identify the cultural norms that are emerging. What are people thinking about? What are they worried about? What are they excited about? So the question I want to ask you is, what digital spaces should we be exploring? Who do you want to listen to? Where are your consumers? Where are your competitors? Where are your clients, right? They're all talking online. And now, especially with the digital natives, with the next generation coming up behind the millennials, with Generation Alpha coming on board, the world is going to be largely determined by pockets of digital culture. So if you want to anticipate what's coming, you have to do it going into these digital spaces. Otherwise, you're operating in a vacuum. So technologically, what we're seeing is this great convergence where we have technological, cultural, and social issues that are all merging all at once. And this is something that is really important to acknowledge, because ultimately, we're not just making technological decisions anymore. Now, every time we make a decision, we have to think about the cultural and social issues that are implied in it as well. So to go back to Replica, if Replica was about digital intimacy, let's think about how digital intimacy could present itself as other products take the same approach. Because what I've noticed in my research is that Replica is actually not the exception. Replica is an indicator of a market norm that is developing, where more companies are deliberately choosing to create these relationships with this artificial intimacy than not. This includes insurance companies that are creating chatbots that, according to their own words, want to be as simple as asking your best friend, not a trusted advisor, a best friend. So it's not just about chatbot technology. It's also about digital intimacy and AI friendships. We had Meta. Meta announced that they had partnered with celebrities to create AI avatars so you can chat with an AI avatar of Kendall Jenner or of Tom Brady. So now we're not just talking about chatbot technology. We're talking about parasocial relationships and celebrity culture and identity. And you can see where this is going. This is going to brand. So soon I might be getting insurance advice from Tom Brady or Kendall Jenner. And if Kendall Jenner gives me terrible insurance advice, then who's liable? Is it Kendall Jenner? Is it the company that bought her likeness? There's so many fascinating questions that we have to kind of muddle through. What if the advice is coming from somebody you really know really well? What if it's a member of your own family? Amazon announced last year that they were experimenting with a feature that could take the voice of a dead loved one and integrate it into the Alexa app. What if grandma really wants you to join Amazon Prime? Are you going to say no to grandma? Think about everything at play here. In addition to the Internet of Things, we also now have grief and death dynamics. We have ethical economics. We have avatars. We have identity. We have family relationships. So it's no longer just about technology. It's about everything else plus the technology. And that's something we have to learn to grapple with, especially considering we're seeing a rise in fraud. So there's a big opportunity where scammers are leveraging this digital intimacy by creating deep fakes where they're pretending to be our loved ones in order to defraud us. And this is only going to get more and more sophisticated. Ultimately, we are combining cutting-edge technology with these ancient human instincts. We are still the same species that falls in love with AI and that also develops affection for technology. So I want to make sure that we know who we're designing these products for, us, and what these products are going to do to our very ancient, very loving human hearts. And in that respect, I think leaders have to embrace their discomfort with complexity and uncertainty, because you can't just make a technology decision anymore. You really have to think about the ethical, social, cultural implications. And that means being educated and connected to the culture that is evolving and to how people are using these tools in new and exciting ways. Ultimately, I believe that disruption is the new normal. This is just the reality of what we live in right now. But in order to thrive, I think the only way that we can maintain our sanity amongst all of these changes is to look at each disruption as a chance to spot an opportunity. There's always opportunity. There's always a mechanism. There's always a little bubble where we can do good and where we can, have a positive impact. And I think that's a really important mindset shift that we have to develop so that we don't shy away from disruption, but that we actually embrace it, go towards it, and deliberately look for how we can actually come through on the other side stronger than we were before. And in order to embrace this mindset, well, to me, that means that we have to recognize and be okay with the fact that the answers we're looking for are always going to be changing. Month to month, year to year, every time we think we have the answers, they're going to change. So what can we do? Well, we can ask questions. We can be committed to asking the right questions again and again and again. Are we building intentional systems of expertise? Are we aligning our technology with our beliefs? Are we participating in the digital commons? Not only do we have to ask questions, but we have to be ready to follow those questions no matter where they lead us, even if it makes us uncomfortable. I believe that the greatest skill we can develop is that of curiosity, because people who are curious understand that there's always, always, always potential. I'd like to end with a quote from one of my favorite sociologists, one that I think about all the time, the great Eric Hoffer. He said, "In a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited, but for a world that no longer exists." So which ones are you going to be? Are you going to choose to be the learners or the learned? Because that choice is up to you. Thank you very much.
Step number one, I made it up here without falling. How is everyone today? Rahaf, where are you? Are you online? We have her in the building, right? Well, in the digital space. Yeah? So, Rahaf, are you here?
I was muted. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. It's so good to hear from you. My name is Nicole Haggerty, as you know, and I was delighted very much by your message about our interaction, mainly because as a former IB student myself, I had a similar interaction in a hallway in the old building that set me on a path that brings me to here today. So I love the story that you brought forward. We're delighted to have you. What a fantastic thought-provoking speech that you just gave us, the keynote address. I remember when you wrote the book, yes, we did. We had you back at IB, and you presented a similar dynamic, highly engaged, highly connected conversation about things that you were learning, and you continue on that path. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and we're really curious to know what our audience would like to know from you. I'm going to start with a question for you. I know that yesterday, over the last few days, you've been engaged in conversations about policy around AI. And I wonder if you could start us off by sharing what's going on in the European Union around AI policy that might be instructive for us here in Canada.
Sure. So thank you so much for your comments, and hello again to everybody. What's happening right now is that we seem to be reaching, not just in the EU, but globally, a convergence point as to how governments are going to start approaching these types of technologies, how we're going to regulate them. So to give you a tiny snippet of why I couldn't be here with you and the focus of my work, just last week, I was named to the United Nations High-Level Advisory on Artificial Intelligence, working with the Secretary General and the member states to try to create some type of like global framework of how countries should be thinking about this. In the UK, just a few days ago, I was in London. They just announced the UK Bletchley AI Accord. We had President Biden a few days before that, who announced the AI presidential directive. And so what we're starting to see now is that governments are not only really looking inwards at how they can start to ensure public safety in terms of the reach, the use, the data, the privacy, the security issues of these tools, but also the interoperability in terms of how governments need to talk to other governments in terms of their own policy. And so last night, I was invited to participate in a working dinner with President Macron to talk specifically about AI governance and how France should be approaching it. And what I can tell you now, having been in conversations with several different policymakers from different countries about this, is that everybody is thinking sort of along the same lines. How can we protect consumers? How can we protect their data? How can we protect privacy? How can we protect them from manipulation? But also, how can we protect society at large from the types of misuses that are running rampant, or that could potentially run rampant, especially when we're considering like the impacts on democracy, on messing with elections, on disinformation, misinformation, things like that. So for Canada, I would really hope to see similar policies that are being rolled out that are really focused on managing AI, not just as a technological issue, but frankly, as a public safety issue, as a direct responsibility to maintaining our democracy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'd like to open it up. Anybody that has questions, I don't know if we have a mic that is available here. Running. Hello. All right.
What about the collateral damage of all this technology? Because a lot of these companies are used to running fast and cleaning up their mess later on. Surgeon General saying no phones before 16, making a recommendation. TikTok does cool things, but it also feeds teenagers all sorts of. The algorithm works in reverse. So, how should leaders be thinking about collateral damage? Workers aren't necessarily happier today. I was just listening on the way in today that I think filings for distress and anxiety, all these things, are up 16% in the United States, federally and at the state level. So lots of interesting stuff with the technology, but it's moving very fast and it has a lot of collateral damage. And in the short term, the results don't seem to be that great. So how should we be thinking about all that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I absolutely agree with you. I think the interesting thing from a leadership perspective is to understand how this type of complexity and ambiguity is going to be infused in every single type of leadership decision. And when you think about sociologically, us just as a species, we have really been taught over the course of our education, we sort of absorbed this idea of like story narratives. And you can see this in the way we talk about technology, where we constantly seem to be searching for the good guy and the bad guy. Is this going to be the villain? Is this going to be the hero? And what we are seeing now is a type of dualism where the same technology is providing incredible harm and also incredible benefit at the same time simultaneously. So the same technology that is allowing information about world events to circulate more freely, let's say, is the same technology that is causing mental distress in young people, the same technology that is powering advancements in, say, synthetic biology or protein folding is the same basis of technology that is creating disinformation and misinformation. And so there really isn't a simple or straightforward answer because the scale of this is happening so fast. I mean, when I think about TikTok, I also am very cognizant of the fact that I'm approaching it as an adult. I'm approaching it as somebody who thinks very intentionally about my algorithmic diet. I teach my students, how are you designing your relationship with these platforms so that they are not manipulating you, so that you can actually design them for connection, for community, for your benefit, instead of just sort of going with the way that the algorithm wants you to go or being manipulated by various business models that have different economic incentives. I mean, I kind of believe you said the Surgeon General. I actually kind of agree with you. I think in a few years, we'll look back on this era and consider it like digital tobacco. I'm sure we'll have conversations that say, can you believe we let young kids just consume this information? So to me, the bigger question is, first and foremost, what can we do right now in our zone of control? And everything that we can do as individuals, specifically as parents, as educators, is to regain control of these algorithms and to empower the people that we work with, the people that we teach, the children that we are raising, to make the algorithm work for them. So I believe that in moderation, with the proper conditions, social media can actually be quite positive under when you have that intentionality structured in, but a lot of people don't have that viewpoint. So they're just getting swept away. So in that respect, I think that there's like an education factor to be there, to be included. And I think this is why I've been encouraging people to go into digital culture spaces, because you can't regulate and you can't educate if you don't understand the technology. And if you don't understand the benefits, if you don't understand the drawbacks, if you're just like thinking about it theoretically, you're going to have a very hard time creating any sense of protection for people to keep them safe, because you just don't understand how the technology works.
All right. Thank you for that. I see a few other questions, one here and one here.
Hi there, Teresa Epton, Accenture. I wanted to ask you about, so Jeffrey Hinton recently spoke in Toronto at Morris Discovery District, and he was up there with Fei Li, who was the founder of ImageNet, really deep in computer vision, yes. So Jeffrey Hinton's vision of what is going to happen to us is perhaps darker, as we know. And Fei Li made a really good point, which was she's far less interested in exploring the actual mechanism of AI than she is taking a look at the use of responsible AI and infusing it, as you say, with our social values. And that's where she's going into. But how can we incent ourselves, right? How can businesses incent themselves? Because in a quarterly reporting cycle, it is a lot easier, and I know this from experience, to convince a group of business leaders to invest in AI for good, to improve biodiversity, such as the work we're doing with the University of Guelph, or carbon. It is a little harder to do that in the long term than it is to, say, do back office transformation, cost takeout, whatever you're going to do with AI. How can we incent business leaders to think more like the vision of Fei Li, so we don't end up where Jeffrey Hinton thinks we're going to be?
Thank you.
That's a great question. To me, I think going back to this idea of the complexity, there isn't like one stakeholder or one approach. I think every single one of us has a role to play. I mean, at its most basic form, right? Business as an economic model depends on people being interested and willing to pay money for the exchange of goods and services. And just right now, as we're starting to see increased consumer awareness and a demand by consumers for brands, for example, to be more diverse, to be more equitable, to be more sustainable, I think that the consumers have a role to play by being quite discerning in terms of what technology platforms they use and to choose companies that are deliberately championing ethical and AI for good. That's one mechanism for it. The other one is regulation. And I know that everyone always just like gets their back up when we talk about regulation, but if you look historically, companies have had a very difficult time self-regulating themselves, right? We had to tell companies, please don't dump toxic chemicals in the ocean. Please don't hire 8-year-olds and force them to work in your factories. Please don't put cancer-causing chemicals in the products that we all use. And so I also think there's a role where we as a society have to establish a standard of what we are willing to tolerate. And an ethical standard could be, for example, that we need technology that is prioritizing mental health, that is prioritizing safety. We want data audits that ensure that the algorithms are operating in a way that is like beneficial and functional to society, not like some of the reports we've been seeing where the algorithms are deliberately trying to get people worked up through anger and through horrible content in order to increase engagement. So there's an entire conversation as a society around the social contract of what we sort of owe each other. There's a piece for government regulation. There's a piece for consumer action. And I know that some people might feel very discouraged because these technology platforms are so massive and they're so far reaching. But I actually think this is just an opportunity for us to be empowered. We as citizens have the ability to vote with our attention, with our data, with our money, with our usage, and to put pressure on organizations to create better practices. I'll remind you that at certain points in the last couple of years, consumer pressure on large technology organizations have forced them to update things like terms of service and put protection policies in place. That was done by public pressure. And then we've got the regulatory environment. In Europe, we have the Digital Services Act that just passed that includes a lot of text and a lot of context around things like liability and hate speech and content moderation and the responsibility of these platforms to ensure a safe experience. So again, going back, there's no one right answer, but I would say that each one of us as individuals have an opportunity through our own unique choices to take a step towards what future scenario you want to live in. And then that extends to organizations, right? What companies are you supporting? What technologies are you investing in? What type of metrics are you using? What vendors are you privileging? And so like, these are the types of questions that like each one of us has a tiny step to do. And if everybody takes it in, then we'll see the same type of regulation that made, that put rules around like food consumption and transportation and wearing seatbelts and flying safely on planes. Those all started at one point by individuals and groups coming together and saying, hey, like we actually think there's a baseline, a minimum standard of care of what we're willing to tolerate in our society.
Okay. Thank you. One more question? We have time for one more question. So I'm going to have it here.
Coming at this from a perspective of a creative human connector, and I'm really interested in this idea of ancient human instincts that you talked about. I would say, 5 years ago, I would have thought someone who did graphic design or someone who wrote scripts, like their jobs were safe, because how could we ever replace that? And of course, we've seen that hugely disrupted. I'm curious, is there an ancient human instinct that will become more valuable now? Is there something about human realness or this idea that becomes more valuable in a world where everything can be created? Is there a human instinct that we should be doubling down on as we look ahead?
I mean, I love that. I love that question. I don't know if it's about like a human instinct, but I think the value of humanness is going to definitely get an increased focus. And I don't know if this is the perfect sort of analogy, but I have been trying to wrap my head around the changes that have been happening in the knowledge market specifically. And I wonder if if fast fashion isn't actually a really interesting comparison, just for the sake of this exercise. I haven't made up my mind. So when I look at fast fashion, I see that what's happening in knowledge work is going to be very similar to fast fashion. Now we have algorithms that can generate content at an unprecedented level about anything and everything. And researchers are now calling that the polluted web, because anybody and everybody can now just like post blog posts, newsletters, videos, images. It's the whole thing. So we're seeing sort of the commoditization of information in such a way that it's losing its value. I believe it's going to lose its value. If there's 8,000 units of information all the time, an infinite amount of information, then as a consumer, what are you going to do? You're going to turn to brand. And so I wonder if we're going to start to look at trusted brands the same way we differentiate between fast fashion and say like luxury fashion, or some of like the high fashion, some of the haute couture brands, right? Because there are some people, if the model is going to be free, there's going to be a segment of the population that's always just going to go for free, for cheap, for readily available. But I believe there will also be an emergent category of people that say, there's so much information out there, I'm going to go back to brands. I want to make sure that I'm guaranteed that I'm getting human-made research, human-made content, human-made books. The same way now we try to buy, cruelty-free products, the same way we buy sustainably made products, the same way we try to buy ethical products. So I think we're just going through this like short-term flood of the market where everything is like very unregulated and it's very chaotic. But eventually, I think we're going to have sort of a settling down, because as I mentioned, the short-term gain of all of this information pollution will result in the erosion of information. So eventually consumers will have to align themselves. So I maybe think we might see like, human made in the next couple of years, and have that be something that I know I will personally be looking for in terms of some of the knowledge products that I consume.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rahaf. If I could offer a parting thought, something that's really on my mind as I listen to you. There's a few things that come out. One is about this nature of curiosity. And so I have a quick question for the room. How many of you use TikTok regularly? Put your hand up. Thank you for confessing to that. I'm also a TikTok stalker. Secondly, how many of you regularly use ChatGPT in your work today? More. Okay. So it's interesting. Not everybody's hand went up, but I think there's a core message in what Rahaf said, what you said about curiosity and being engaged. I teach a course that I designed a dream elective course across the programs at IBA called Technology and Humanity. Technology and Humanity. And I asked them this very question about what do we do? Like, what can we do in a world where these things they're already out of the gate and they're surpassing us? And they came up with, we need government regulation. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need, the schools to teach us these things. We need all these other people were doing things. And I kept asking them, what else? What else can we do? What else can we do? And then finally they were out of all their answers. And I looked at them and I said, well, what about you? What about you? What can you do as a leader, as a future leader, right, to address these questions? And I think it really goes back to the idea of, in our sustainability critical issue, we think about long-term prosperity. And I would add one thing, well-being, long-term prosperity and well-being. What's the world we are trying to create? Well, you create it, right? We create it as parents, as members of civil society, as members of government, but we create it as leaders. So, Rahaf, I'd like to thank you so much for that inspiring talk and very thought-provoking. And I'm so pleased to get a chance to see you again. I'm sure we're going to have you back in the HBA classroom to inspire others too. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I'd also like to thank Rahaf. I thought that was a great session to start the day off. And Nicole, thanks for the leading the Q&A and some of your observations. I guess for me, a couple quick takeaways. First, do you want to be a learner or learnt? And I think the challenge was get on these platforms, start to understand more about these platforms so that we make sure that as we look at the opportunity, we understand the opportunity and we make the best of the opportunity, but also understand the threats that are out there and we're managing the risks. So that's the challenge.